Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our OSBI Legal Expense Insurance webinar. Today's session is to provide you an understanding of why OSBI is providing legal expense insurance to our members. We will provide an outline of the specific coverages being offered under our new program, along with specific exclusions for each type of coverage. Legal expense will have a different claims process in place, which will be addressed by Yi later on in this presentation. We anticipate the formal part of our presentation will take approximately 15 minutes, allowing the remaining time to answer your questions. I am Tammy Hicks. I am the Director of Risk Management and Member Services at OSBI. Joining me today is Sandra Taylor, OSBI's CFO, as well as Yi Mei, one of OSBI's in-house legal representatives. Society is becoming more litigious, and as a result, school boards are facing rising and unpredictable legal expenses. This is an issue that I believe we can all agree will not be changing anytime soon. As a result, one area of concern that was shared with us by our members was the need for school boards to have access to a product that could assist them with these increasing legal expenses. The area that seems to be the greatest concern to our members is that of human rights. Hearing this concern, OSBI decided to explore the possibility of offering a legal expense product that could assist in mitigating some of these legal costs. So with this in mind, OSBI designed a legal expense insurance policy, which is intended to lower legal costs for our members with the ultimate goal to make legal expenses more predictable and manageable for them. So what is legal expense insurance? Legal expense insurance is a specialized product tailored to school boards' businesses that is intended to provide OSBI members coverage for legal expenses they incur in defending or pursuing the school board's legal rights where coverage does not exist under an existing liability insurance policy. Sandra will now walk you through the coverages being offered under our new product.
Thank you, Tammy. OSBI's policy has 4 coverage clauses that I'm going to discuss now. 1.1 contract disputes, 1.2 non-union employment disputes, 1.3 property disputes, and 1.4 human rights. The first coverage we'll look at is contract disputes. This coverage will pay for legal expenses incurred in the pursuit of or defense of a legal proceeding commenced by or brought against the insured arising from the operations of the board. This would include disputes arising out of contract for services, as well as contracts for the sale, purchase, lease, or rental of goods. It's most important to note in this coverage clause that the contract has to be entered into on or after the inception date of the policy in order for coverage to apply. So if you purchase this policy effective Jan 1, 2019, then your coverage would start for any contracts entered into after that date. Some exclusions to this section of the coverage include contracts for the provision of insurance, credit, secured lending, or guarantee, contracts of employment, contracts for the possession, purchase, sale, or use of property, claims where they're contemplating that the board has breached their professional duty. Those types of claims would be covered by the OSBI CGL policy. A good example of a situation where this type of coverage would apply. The board purchases the legal expense coverage effective Jan 1, 2019. On January 10th, 2019, the board enters into a contract for snow removal services. In March of 2019, a dispute arises regarding fulfillment of the requirements of the contract, and the board proceeds with a legal proceeding against the contractor. Based on the timelines of the action and the signing of the contract, this coverage would apply for the payment of the legal expenses to pursue this claim. Our next coverage clause is 1.2 non-union employment. The next coverage clause we will review is a non-union employment dispute clause. This coverage will indemnify the named insured for legal expenses from legal proceedings arising from the defense of employment disputes with non-unionized employees. There are a couple of important exclusions to this clause. Legal expenses for proceedings where any employee is represented by a trade union or collective agreement, or any legal expense from legal proceedings arising from trade union activities, including collective agreements or bargaining rights, will not be insured through this policy. Another exclusion is that any legal proceeding occurring in the first 90 days of coverage is not included. Think of this as a 90-day waiting period from the effective date of the policy. This is a one-time waiting period. An example of the coverage under non-union employment would be that the board purchases the legal expense policy on January 1, 2019. On April 15, 2019, the board terminates the employment of a non-unionized employee. This employee then hires a lawyer and presents a demand for compensation for wrongful dismissal. This non-unionized employee, the legal proceeding would then be reimbursed for the board to respond to this demand. The next section is property disputes. And in this section, this coverage indemnifies the insured for legal expenses arising from the pursuit of or defense of legal proceedings relating to disputes over the possession of property owned, tenanted, or occupied by the board, physical damage to property owned or occupied by the board, disputes between the insured and landlords or tenants, and the serving of an eviction order, provided that the board will suffer financial loss if it fails to act. And finally, it's important to note that property disputes to be covered under this policy must be commenced during the policy period. Some important exclusions on this clause is that it does not, and of particular interest to school boards, I'm sure, it does not pay for the legal expenses relating to planning, building regulations or decisions, expropriation, or compulsory purchase orders. It also does not pay for the pursuit of non-payment of rent, nor to discussions or negotiations related to the renewal of a lease or other contract for the use of property. A good claims situation for this one. An example of this would be where the board has purchased the coverage effective January 1, 2019, and later on in 2019, the board sustains property damage due to a vehicle impact. If the damage falls below the board's deductible, this policy could pay for the legal proceeding against the responsible party for the damage to the building. Our final coverage clause is human rights, and this policy will pay for the legal expenses for the defense of legal proceedings commenced at the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario against the insured arising out of the operation of the named insured. Notice must be brought against the named insured during the policy period. So this would be either January 1st, 2019 or the purchase date that the board buys the policy. There's a couple of key exclusions to this coverage. The first is that it does not cover for disputes arising from a contracting party because that is covered elsewhere, nor from disputes with the contract of employment, also covered elsewhere. And finally, as with our coverage clause 1.2, there's no coverage for any dispute for an employee that is represented by a trade union. Now I'm going to look at a claims example for a human rights claim. In this instance, the board purchases the policy effective Jan 1, 2019. In February of 2019, a parent submits a complaint regarding a violation of their child's human rights due to the failure of the board to accommodate their child's needs. In this instance, the policy would respond to pay for the board's defense. I'm now going to turn it over to Yi, who's going to talk to you about some key definitions, common exclusions, and the claims process.
Thank you, Sandra. This policy provides coverage for legal proceedings, which means proceedings commenced in Canada before a court, an arbitrator or panel of arbitrators, and or a legally constituted tribunal or board, such as the Human Rights Tribunal. It's important to know that arbitrations are covered and are considered legal proceedings. Legal proceedings also includes a written demand that the board reasonably believes would lead to a proceeding if the board does not respond to the demand. For example, if a parent sends the board a letter saying that they would bring a human rights application against the board if the board doesn't accommodate their child, then that letter is considered a written demand and meets the definition of a legal proceeding. However, if the board gets an angry phone call from a parent who threatens to bring an application against the board, then that angry phone call doesn't rise to the level of a legal proceeding. Legal proceedings also doesn't include criminal or statutory proceedings. It doesn't include situations where the board or board employee is the one bringing a human rights application against a third party. I'll move on to some of the common exclusions. There is no coverage for historical liability claims that predate OSB. There is also no coverage for legal expenses related to freedom of information requests or for fines imposed by regulatory authorities. There is no coverage for lawsuits by or against government bodies. Finally, the policy would pay the legal fees up to the limit, but does not cover any award or compensation that the board is ordered to pay. One of the benefits of this coverage is that policyholders will have access to representation by prominent law firms that have experience working with school boards. These law firms are full-service firms that practice in the coverage areas. There are also French-speaking lawyers available. We have negotiated an added service to policyholders from some of these firms. Currently, 5 firms have agreed to provide 1 hour of free legal advice and consultation to policyholders in the areas of coverage. We have also negotiated competitive rates for policyholders. For boards that have long-standing relationships with a particular law firm or lawyer, we will help maintain those relationships. Boards just have to let us know in advance which law firm or lawyer they would like to continue working with, and we will add that law firm or lawyer to our list if the firm practices in the areas of coverage. In terms of the claims process, it is quite simple. Step 1, the board receives an originating process like an application or a written demand, or the board decides to commence legal proceedings. Step 2, the board notifies OSB by email of the legal proceeding. The board will then be given a legal expense claim form to fill out. This form identifies the type of legal proceeding and asks for basic information about the dispute. Step 3, OSB confirms whether there is coverage and approves the law firm that the board would like to use, if that firm is not already on the list. Step 4, the board ensures that the law firm retained provides OSB with a copy of the legal budget, which would be updated from time to time. Finally, the board sends OSB the legal invoices for reimbursement. The board can also take advantage of the 1 hour of free legal advice before retaining a law firm. My final comment before I hand it over to Tammy is that as a lawyer, I know firsthand how legal fees can add up and how unpredictable they can be. Legal expense insurance provides certainty and protection for school boards. As far as I know, there is only one other insurance company that offers a similar product in Canada. So we're very excited to take the lead in offering this to our members. Thank you.
It is important to note that our initial offering of this product, at this time, we are only providing the coverage to our member school boards. Our legal expense insurance has been launched in conjunction with our 2019 renewal, so the policy will have it at earliest an effective date of January 1st, 2019 if the board should purchase the coverage. We have decided to provide our members two options for coverage at this renewal. Both options have a maximum limit of coverage for any single claim of $50,000. The differentiator will be based on the policy limit for a particular policy period. For example, option A has a $500,000 general aggregate limit, which means the maximum amount paid under the policy for the policy period would be $500,000. Whereas option B has a $1 million general aggregate limit, which means the maximum paid under this policy for the policy term would be $1 million. We have provided quote indications for each option in your renewal package for your board's considerations. Thank you, Yi and Sandra. I trust the information you have shared with us today will assist our members in making an informed decision as to whether or not they would like to purchase this coverage. I would also like to thank our participants for attending our legal expense webinar.